Hello, and welcome back to the Tea and Soju C Drama podcast, your safe spot for C drama chatter. I'm your host, Liliana, and it's time to sit back, grab your tea, and let's chat Asian dramas. In today's episode, we are going back to the guest series, and we have a very special guest, which we will get into in just a minute. But before that, just some housekeeping. If you like the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe on the platform you listen to. That really helps the podcast reach other listeners. For more content, check out Patreon, where you can find behind the scenes first impressions, movie reviews, and more. Finally, if you would like to chat to me or find a community, check out Discord, Instagram, and other socials. The link is in the episode notes. So, in today's episode, we are going to be doing almost like a travel to China guide and Mandarin and everything along those lines. And we have a very special guest. Her name is Anna, and I will let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm from London and I have been running a Mandarin Studygram on Instagram since 2019, where I have been documenting on and off my Mandarin learning journey.
So that is Anna. Do follow her on Instagram, and I have actually found some of her things really helpful because I'm trying to learn Mandarin as well, and it feels like such a daunting task all the time. So I'm very excited to have you on, and I know people will have, be very interested to listen to what you have to say. So we have some questions for Anna. And actually, some of these are, questions that I collected from people. Some of these are questions that I put together. So, Anna, how did you get into Mandarin? How did that come about?
So my aim originally was to be able to talk to my Malaysian Chinese mum in Mandarin. So I think I definitely started off as they call it a heritage learner. So in the beginning, I was a heritage learner. So a heritage learner is, or some people call them obligated learners, are learners who have a feeling that they're expected to learn or know the language.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I have a memory of going back to my auntie's house in Malaysia and her trying to talk in Chinese to me and feeling very awkward because I didn't really understand. And her saying
Yeah.
to me, don't forget who you are. So something along those lines. And it
Mm-hmm.
kind
Mm-hmm.
of really resonated with me. So I started to have a kind of judgment I made on myself that I should know how to speak Chinese. And well, I feel like I had this judgment faintly in my head before, but it came more prominent. And I'd say since I was little, I always have wanted to connect more to my Chinese heritage. Um, so there are a lot of people in similar situations to me and start in the category of heritage learner. Then they find their own reason to learn a language when they become a more serious learner. So
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
I would say I've changed to become a cultural connector learner. So
Yeah.
this is someone that's like intrigued by culture, people, history. And I know this podcast is mainly about Asian TV shows. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
watching Chinese shows does bring me closer to Chinese culture. And I get a lot of fulfillment through connecting through language. And I know that to truly connect to Chinese culture, you can only connect truly by learning the language. So, yeah, how did I get into Mandarin? My motivation was because I wanted to connect with my Chinese
Mm.
heritage.
Yeah.
But
I
oh, go ahead.
absolutely I was just gonna say I absolutely get where you're coming from because we were just speaking about this before we started recording the episode where I said when I moved to the UK, my mum made sure that I still spoke Portuguese at home. And at the time, I used to absolutely hate it. I didn't really like it. But now, in my 30s, I'm so glad that she made me do that because
Yeah.
I totally understand that need to connect to culture. Culture is such an important part of identity, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think not being able to learn the language or not knowing the language can definitely, impact. I completely get, like, I have a lot of friends who speak fluent Mandarin or, are had descendants or were born in China or Hong
Hmm.
Kong or, various different places. And it's very fun to watch a drama alongside them because they will often pick up on a lot of things that just go over the head of like international viewers completely.
Mm.
Because I completely agree with you, to completely immerse yourself in a culture you have to know the language. Like there's just no other way around it. um but yeah, you were saying about, getting into Mandarin and connecting to culture. And I identify in a different way, but I still identify with the situation for sure.
Yeah. I sometimes ask my mom, why didn't you teach me Mandarin when I was
Mm.
little? And she says at the time she just thought me and my brother would be confused, but now I am learning, and my brother actually lives in Taiwan now, so his Mandarin's really
Mm.
good. So it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
something
yeah.
that has impacted both of us. Like we both
Yeah.
really want to learn the language.
Mm. But I guess it would have been nice to have started young, but
Oh
I'm
my
glad
God,
that you
yes.
both, I'm sure it would, but I'm glad that you both kind of found your way there and found your way to sort of like connect with that part.
Mm.
I've always said, especially for someone who doesn't have anybody around them that speaks the language fluently, like for me, I just figure this is going to be a lifelong, journey of
It is,
learning because
absolutely it is.
it's such a complex language. And I
It's a
think even,
mission.
yeah, I feel like even Chinese people themselves are like, so it must be difficult to learn, or even when they to write and all of that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I would
Uh,
say, from a Western perspective, if your first language is a Western language, I would say
mhm.
it's one of the hardest languages out there. Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus is
Yeah.
that Mandarin is. I thought it was quite interesting because I started dabbling a little bit in Korean a lot, a couple of years back, and
Oh, I see.
Korean is a lot easier to pick up in terms of writing. Their alphabet is much easier. And then when I did the switch, because I will say my main purpose is because I want to understand, references and dramas and the culture more. Because if I'm talking about it, I want to pay respect to the culture.
Yeah.
Um, but and I always kept saying I butcher the names, I butcher, look, I try, but sometimes it is what it is.
Yeah.
And my aim is to one day get to the point where I can confidently like talk about his names and things like that and places and and not sound so butchered.
Yeah.
But when I
Tones
did
are really
the
hard. Oh,
they really are,
my
they
ears are
really
really
are.
bad at listening to tones, and my brother actually is pitch perfect. So when he was a child, he could play piano. He knows all the notes. So that really
Mm.
helped him learn Chinese. So when I talk to him in Chinese, he's like, "Your tones are awful." It's very
Mm.
upsetting.
For him, though, it must be a lot easier because obviously he lives in Taiwan. He's immersed
Absolutely.
in that language. And I've always said it's the easiest way to learn a language because when I moved to the UK, I think I spoke about 2 words of English and that was it. And within 2 weeks, I was in school and I was like, well, I gotta learn because, you can't
Yeah.
do anything without
You're
learning.
forced to.
So,
Yeah. And you're
yeah,
immersed. It's everywhere.
Yeah, you hear. I always said, like, my brother would always put subtitles on TV shows and everything in English, and it would force me to like connect words with what I was listening. And it was, but learning something like that, the alphabet is the same. I mean, it sounds different, but the alphabet is the same. When you're transitioning to an Asian language, any Asian language, not just Mandarin, but Korean,
Mhm.
Japanese, any. It's like it's a whole different writing system.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I totally get that. I recorded a podcast episode with Sarah from K-Drama This, and Sarah is a fluent Mandarin speaker. I think, oh God, Sarah, if you're listening to this and I'm wrong, please, I'm sorry. I think if I'm remembering correctly, she's originally from Hong Kong. But so she speaks Mandarin fluently, and we had an episode, and she was like, the way she says something, like wuxia or xianxia or anything like that, and I would say it, and she would say it, sounds completely different. It's the same word, and I'm like,
It's
God,
so upsetting, isn't it?
it really, really is. But I love when she would be like, there's a slight, she explains it quite well with tones and stuff. So if you're on, go and connect with her as well. She lives in the UK. She's lives in the UK. So we speak quite often, and I'm like, she just corrects me, and I'm like, thank you. Correct me as much as you want, and I'll try and remember it for next time.
It's good to have someone in your life that does that.
Yeah. So, how did you approach the process of starting to learn Mandarin? Because I feel like it's like, where do you even begin? And there's so much information out there, and people are like, some people always say, well, you don't need to write it, you just need to, speak it. And some people say, start from this. It's like a wild world out there. So, how did you
Yeah.
personally like approach it?
So in the beginning, yeah, it's hard to know where to start. So I think I actually tried to learn Chinese a couple of times before I actually became somewhat serious. So for
Hmm.
me, getting a private one-on-one teacher was a game changer because I found it hard to continue learning after starting and like I found it hard to find the motivation to learn from London. And so having a teacher kept me in check and studying. So I had the motivation to start always in the beginning, but maintaining it was hard. And a teacher is what kept me going. But I know not everyone can afford a teacher. So nowadays you can find really cheap teachers who are students online on platforms
Oh.
like italki. And if you don't want to spend any money, there are so many people on apps like Tandem who want to do language exchange. So it's so easy to access. And I would say I'm a bit of a people pleaser also. So knowing the teacher was there to judge me if I didn't turn up was motivation. So also when I started studying, COVID hit. So I had no excuse to give up. That took me from like a beginner level to intermediate level.
Hmm.
So now it's harder for me to give up as I've invested so much in the language. But I truly believe you need a strong reason to learn a language, and this will be your motivation. So I have a friend, and I think she started learning French. I think the reason she started learning French because someone had said to her, "You can't learn that language," and it
Oh,
just, yeah,
yeah,
that made her start to learn, but it wasn't good motivation to keep her
yeah.
learning. So you need to show up to class or whatever you do to study every day, choosing to learn and not
Hmm.
white knuckle your way through it. So you need to, yeah, have a strong motivation because it's a choice. And with Chinese, you need to accept it is going to take you years. And
Yeah.
reaching perfect Chinese is something that you should not focus on or be concerned with because it doesn't exist. So, yeah, even Chinese people don't know all the characters in the textbook. So, people don't have time for that. So, the target should be fluency. Yeah.
Yeah. I think whenever I pick up a word, because obviously, like, just from watching dramas, not even from learning, but just from watching dramas constantly, there's words that you can kind of like pick up on if people are saying them enough, like common words
Yeah.
like thank you or how are you or, I like you. Those kind of like simple phrases that you hear constantly. I still to this day, whenever I don't need the subtitles and I pick up something, I'm so excited that
I
that's happened. And
feel
I
like it
feel
sticks in
like,
your mind more as well when you if you've consciously like picked something up from a drama and then you look it up on the dictionary, you're kind of looking at it
mm,
in different ways. It does stick in your mind.
yeah, I didn't know about those two apps. I will put them both in the description notes for you guys because I think they're very useful resources. So look for them in the episode notes. So, now, this is where we sort of start, going the other direction. If people are interested in learning but feeling, like I said, really overwhelmed, where would you recommend them starting to learn? So imagine this is a completely beginner of a person. Where would you sort of like recommend them start?
So I would recommend kind of repeating what I said in the last question, definitely to get a teacher because you need
Hmm.
structure. You need to fully understand how important things like tones are in the beginning. And I feel like for me, coming because my mother tongue is English, maybe you don't appreciate how important tones are.
Mm.
Um, and I can move on to resources that I would recommend as well.
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah, we can go ahead. And also, I will, just to the listeners, Anna will mention these now, but again, I will put all of these in the description notes so you guys can have access to them as well.
So, resources that I really like, starting with Chinese learning language podcasts. So, there are loads of Chinese language learning podcasts out there, but my personal favorites are there's a podcast called Chill Chat.
Mm.
It consists of a husband and wife couple where the wife is a Mandarin teacher and her husband is an American learning Chinese. It's
Okay.
it's really wholesome and it's really nice seeing the husband's Mandarin progression. So when I
Mm-hmm.
first started, his Mandarin was definitely a beginner, but now he's really good. It's quite impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Another
Okay.
podcast I would recommend is How to Learn Chinese podcast.
Okay.
So, this podcast provides tips and insights and strategies for learning Mandarin effectively and in a smarter way. And it has inspirational interviews as well. So, at first, I
Okay.
wasn't sure about this podcast because I was
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah, yeah.
it's not really teaching me Mandarin.
Mm.
Uh, what is it? Is it going to be that entertaining? But it provides really smart ways to learn, which I like, and it's quite nice hearing like another learner's perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then my next recommendation is Chinese graded readers.
Okay.
So these are books which are actually written for learners.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like such an achievement when you're able to read a story in Chinese as a beginner. So these Chinese graded readers make that possible. Because I remember in the beginning picking up a Chinese children's book. It's supposed to be very simple, but I really struggled to read it. I think I actually gave up. And actually, listening to the How to Learn Chinese podcast, they've mentioned this, and they've said actually children's books have quite complex words in them.
Mm.
Like if you think of English books,
Yeah.
English children's books, there are some words that you might not really see or use in normal day life.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
these Chinese graded readers are great, and it just makes you feel like you've achieved something. So I definitely
Mhm.
recommend them. Of course, I need to recommend Chinese TV. So
Yeah.
Chinese TV is great as you want to imitate living language. So you want
Mhm.
to get that flow, that rhythm. So Chinese TV shows are a great way for you to get familiar with the sound of Chinese and more of an understanding of the culture, which I definitely think is a big interest when you're a beginner, especially.
Mhm.
Moving on to apps, there are loads of apps to get you started, which have free access, like Memrise.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Duolingo. Um, when I talk to other people on Instagram about Duolingo, there's a bit of a mixed reception regarding Chinese, but I've got into it quite recently just because my friends are on there. So
Yeah.
it's kind of encouraged me to start using Duolingo. And I've heard good things about Super Chinese app, but I haven't actually used it myself. But I know that a lot of people in the Chinese learning community on Instagram really like that app.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, these are apps that kind of use gamification to keep it fun.
Mhm. Mhm.
In the very beginning, I was using audio tapes as well. So Pimsleur audio tapes are good when you're starting learning, and they're useful for improving your pronunciation and listening skills. And they focus on daily conversations.
Yeah.
I've already, yeah, mentioned italki for teachers and
Yeah.
Tandem for language exchange buddies.
Yeah.
Regarding grammar, All Set Learning website is a great website for explaining grammar structures. I've actually had some occasions where my Chinese teacher has tried to explain a grammar structure, and I kind of understood it, but then if I read about it on All Set Learning website, because it's written by I think America, some people in America,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they can articulate the structure in a better manner so I can understand it fully. So that's a
Mhm.
really good
Mhm.
website. Um, Flashcards are also great for memorizing words. So I use the Pleco app, and Pleco has a dictionary and flashcard function, and that's very well respected in the Chinese language community. I would also say use a textbook so you have structure, and that's so important to have in the beginning, especially.
Mhm. Mhm.
What else would I recommend? Make a studygram account on Instagram. Uh,
Or just go follow yours.
or do that, yeah. Um, yeah, before the show started, we were talking about, I don't know, that you have like a studygram or you've got a podcast and you find such a nice community. And
Yeah.
I feel like for me, when I made a studygram, I felt like I had more accountability and to learn the language. And I
Mhm.
met such supportive people who encourage you, support you, and you make new friends, just like
Yeah.
people as well. And you can go through the ups and downs together, and you will have ups and downs when you're learning Mandarin. So yeah, we've never had so many resources to take advantage of. So I
Mhm.
would say consistency is key when learning a new language, and combine different resources, practice regularly, and try and immerse yourself in the language as much as possible.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. I know where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna have Drew a little because I didn't know about any of these or most of these. So I'm gonna be taking some notes. And again, I will put all of these in the description notes with links and things so people can go and check them out. So I would say we've already sort of said, tips and tricks that you would sort of recommend. You sort of
Ooh, I could
mentioned,
add
but
to
is there
that.
any?
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, go ahead, go ahead. You can go ahead.
I would also say, for me, because I am an introvert, I would say to everyone, including myself, don't be shy. Speak
Yeah.
out loud. Yeah, so a big challenge for beginners is speaking like a Chinese person. So yeah, the tones and the sound are so important, and sometimes that's hard to understand fully, which I kind of mentioned before. And yeah, you just have to commit. And so Chinese sounds so foreign when your first language is a Western language, and it might feel
Mm.
silly, and but you need to commit to it and just kind of play a role.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it might feel like you're acting. If you use the language, it will become like a muscle memory.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like riding a bike. Like learning a language once you've got it to a certain point, it's it's engraved in there and it's kind of like absolutely just like, it's in there. It's muscle memory. It just automatically comes out. I know that like it's not the same because I learned it when I was younger, but for me, I can literally, it's such like both languages to me, both English and Portuguese are so interwoven together in my brain that I can be speaking English and thinking in Portuguese. I can be speaking, every other word in Portuguese or English, and it works. Like I can be listening one language and speaking the other. It's like they're so meshed together for me that it's like muscle memory. And it was quite
Yeah.
interesting because I went back home for about, I don't know. I lived back home in Portugal for 5 years. When I turned 18, I wanted to go and be in my culture again and sort of relearn it as an adult. And I went back home for
Wow.
5 years and I spoke Portuguese for 5 years and there was no need to use English
This is what I
apart
need to do.
from, yeah, honestly, it's the best thing. I went home and I spoke Portuguese for a long period of time. And actually, I worked over there in shops and a couple of things, and I worked in a couple of tourist areas. So whenever there was like an English person, I was obviously the designate, like pretty much everybody over there speaks English, but I was the designated English speaker for most customers. And but apart from that, I didn't really use English for anything. And it was like I was so worried when I came back to the UK to live again. I was like, am I even gonna know how to speak English? But it's
Mm.
like it's all in there. Once you just start like talking and listening again, it's complete muscle memory. It's like
Yeah.
everything's in there. So yeah, I completely get where you're coming from
I
with
think
that.
I've read somewhere like I think they've compared like learning Chinese to like learning guitar. So yeah, you can't read a book about learning to play guitar and know how
You
to
have
play
to do
guitar.
it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
same applies to Chinese. You can't read a book on Mandarin and know how to speak. You need to practice
Mm-mm.
speaking every day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I do think it's like really hard if you're not in a Chinese speaking country, because when you are in China, Chinese people will give you a lot of positive reinforcement and you're surrounded
Hmm.
by it as well. So yeah, it's hard.
I think one of the easiest and quickest ways is honestly to be immersed fully in the culture to learn the language is like being in a place that speaks it. And I tell you, when I go, I live in a town, but I live about 30 minutes from a bigger city. And there's like a huge Asian supermarket where I live, and it's
Mm.
ran by people from Hong Kong. So when you go in, and they're like, sometimes they're speaking Mandarin, sometimes they're speaking Cantonese. And whenever I go in, like my ears perk up because I'm like
Mm-hmm.
just so excited to
That's me as well.
hear, yeah, to hear like the Mandarin language spoken. Because I think it's a beautiful language. Like, I think Asian languages in general just sound very beautiful, like with their tones and everything. Yes, they are incredibly hard to learn, but they just sound beautiful to me. And yeah, my ears absolutely perk up, and I'm like, let's see if I can pick up like one word, because
Yeah.
that's the real test. Because like when
Real life
you learn
situation.
yeah, because when you're learning, it's teachers or whatever, you can slow down. They're not speaking, like you can listen to tapes and stuff, but I feel like they are slower at speaking. But in
Mm.
a real life conversation,
Yeah.
people are like, but they're a lot faster, unless you obviously ask them, can you please like slow down a little bit? And I would do this all the time when I was learning English. Like, I would speak very quick. Like, I would ask, can you please just slow down a little bit? But like I said, it is absolutely, those situations are the type of situations that you'll learn more from, is like being completely pushed into that. You have
Yeah.
to learn or you kind of like can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
I'm actually planning to move to Taiwan in September to study Mandarin. So
really?
I've said to myself, I'm gonna have to like force myself to talk and I don't know, kind of try and play games with myself to like change my
Hmm.
personality. Like maybe even pretend I'm someone else. So I'd like talk to people I don't know and like be more outgoing than I normally would be, just to take advantage of that opportunity when
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like you absolutely want to take advantage completely of that situation. I think you'll improve leagues and bounds like when you're in
should in
that
theory.
situation,
Yeah.
in theory, but I think you will, because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like you're in the situation where you kind of have to. And I
Yeah.
think, like, for me, there are certain countries, I will say there are certain countries, and I might annoy if I have any French listeners, I'm sorry. France is very well known for doing this, where people will try and speak French, and like they'll just speak English back at you.
Mm-hmm.
And like that to me, but that's not every country. And I think like Asian countries, a lot of them, they will be so happy. Like, I see these people that go on holiday and they will try and speak the language, and Asian people just get very excited that somebody is trying. So,
Yeah. So you
I
get a
think,
lot of positive reinforcement, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
which
And
is
I think
great
that's
when you're
so
learning.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that's so important when like people are just excited that you're learning their language. It makes a whole difference. And they'll tell you, oh, say it slightly different, or, anything like that. I think I can't believe you're going. It's going to be so much fun for you. And I think you'll have, I can't wait. Will you be documenting it for us to see over
Yeah,
on
I
Instagram? I
will.
was going to
I've been
say.
quite quiet on Instagram recently, but yeah, I will be documenting it when I leave. But yeah, it's daunting because I'm like quitting my job and going back to study in my 30s, but it's something I definitely want to do before settling down, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And are you going to be close to your brother, where your brother's staying over there, or
That's a good question. I think will be location wise, will be relatively close
yeah,
because
yeah.
I think he lives relatively close to the university I'll be going to. So yeah.
Mm. That's really exciting. I cannot wait for you to share that with us, because I think it'll be a really, great journey for us to sort of accompany you on. So yeah, and
Can't wait.
actually, that is because I have a question. We'll jump one question ahead and we'll come back. But that's quite exciting, because I said let's chat social media. You've got pretty impressive Instagram page. How did you start to build the your Instagram page, and how did that come about?
So I think I started it just before COVID. I started posting and writing about my Chinese learning experience, and it was really nice finding a community.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely contributed to my motivation and made me, yeah, as I said, feel more kind of, yeah, accountable. And when I am active on Instagram, I normally post Chinese quizzes in my stories about interesting things and sometimes quite mundane things in life. And it's to revise words for myself and other Mandarin learners.
Mm-hmm.
I also post my homework, which I have written out neatly to kind of solidify characters in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
find writing words out at my own pace just a very relaxing activity to do, not just to study.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been following on there for a little while, and I have fun just going through things and like, seeing what you're learning and kind of following along the journey. I feel like it's really good to have like that community there and thinking there's other people that are also learning. So
And
we can,
struggling as well.
we're struggling along together.
Actually, I think
Um,
last year I had like a few months where I didn't have a teacher and I was still studying, but not very much. And I wasn't giving up, but just a lack of motivation. I don't know what it was.
mm,
So yeah, there are highs and there are lows. I would say to everyone out there, try and not give up completely, because if you do give up completely, you do forget a lot. So even
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like studying maybe like 10 minutes a day, or not very much. And I just you really forget stuff quite quickly if
Mm,
you don't have Chinese around you. So
mm.
it's something you need to maintain. Try to
Absolutely.
get that
Uh,
motivation.
so you're learning Mandarin and that's daunting enough as it is. But if you had the chance, is there any other language you'd think you'd want to learn?
One language. Does it have to be one language?
No, no, you can say as many as you want.
um, so I guess top languages, French,
Mm,
Cantonese, but maybe that's influenced because my mother's actual mother tongue is Cantonese.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So maybe Cantonese, Spanish,
Mm.
it's Japanese, Korean. I guess.
Japanese, Japanese is another daunting one. I feel like
Well,
Japanese and Mandarin are,
I
because
think
they
I.
have,
Oh yeah, carry on.
yeah, because like I was just gonna say, because for Japanese, I think they have two writing systems as well, which is
Yeah, or
I
maybe
don't know.
even three. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, I don't know, but yeah. See, Spanish for me is one of those where if they're speaking slowly, which they often don't, but if they speak slowly, our languages are similar enough. Portuguese and Spanish are similar enough that I could get by. And like, if I was to move to Spain, for example, I could get by and I would very quickly pick up the language fully because it's similar to Portuguese.
Mm.
It's, words are very similar. So yeah, I do quite like Spanish. And actually, funny story, when I was in school, you have to learn languages in school. So French for me was fairly easy because my
Mhm.
mum lived in France for when she was young for 5 or 10 years, 5 years, I think, 5 or 6 years when she was younger.
Mhm.
And she did some school there. So I picked up French fairly easy because my mum would help me with certain things. And it's just a language that I think because the root is very similar to Portuguese, you
Yeah.
can sort of pick up those languages quite easily. And then when we got to year 10, you would either learn German or Spanish. Now, I really wanted to learn Spanish because I was like, this is going to be great for me. I'm going to pick it up fairly easy. It's going to
Yeah.
be an easy subject for me
Yeah,
to
you think
ace.
so?
No, the problem was they were doing it on a rotation. So one year would get Spanish, the other year coming after would get German. My
Oh,
year group got
what?
lumbered with German. And I was
Who
like,
was the
this
mastermind behind that?
I don't know. The worst thing was the year. I went into year 10 and this system was in place. By the time I went from year 10 to year 11, so the new year nines coming to year 10, that system had been abolished and you could just choose which language you wanted. I hated German with a fever, probably even more so because it probably stopped me from learning Spanish at the time. And if I had learned Spanish, I probably would have taken it to A level, I think.
Such a
And,
shame.
German, I did it for year 10 or year 9. No, yeah,
Mm,
it's year 9 that you had the opportunity. I did it for year 9 or year 10 or whichever it was. And then I was like, I'm never touching it again. Like, it feels like such an angry language to me.
yeah,
Whereas, like, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, like, those languages are very melodic almost when we talk. So
yeah.
I was like, I was so frustrated. So that's my little, ramble about that. Um,
I'd
but
w
yeah,
I wish I just had more time to learn these languages. Like I have a list of languages I'd love to learn, but it's just finding that time.
have you ever, I think you must have come across these like I think they're called is it polyglots where they
Yeah.
know like 10 or 15 languages. And I'm like, how? How? Like, do you live to learn language? I think
I,
that a lot of them like go and live in the countries and like
yeah.
immerse themselves, but
I think they
I
must start young and like they're
mm,
students and they just start from there, which I think I should have done now. Looking back now.
mm, mm.
It
If I
wasn't something I thought about when I was younger though.
mm, mm, yeah. So yeah, right. Next up, a part of your page is traveling. And to all the places you've visited, one of I know this is probably going to be a hard question, but what was like one of your favorite places that you've visited?
I feel like for me, hands down, it's gonna have to be Taiwan, especially because I'm chosen to move there to
Yeah,
study
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. Yeah, the people are just so warm and friendly, and if you're learning Chinese, especially, you really appreciate that. And I also really like
Mm-hmm,
hiking, and it's got really beautiful landscapes and delicious food. And I feel like I personally feel like it has like Chinese culture, but with Japanese pop culture influence, which I
yeah,
really like.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I would have to say Taiwan.
Mm. It's a friend of mine that I talk to over on the Tea and Soju Discord server. She has just come back from like, I think she was in Taiwan for 2 weeks and
Mhm.
she loved it. She's been sharing some of her pictures with us, and I'm like, oh, this is, it's on my list to go and visit. Like China and Taiwan are two places that are definitely on my,
Visit me when I'm
bucket
there.
list. Yes, yes, I should, shouldn't I? Just go, Anna, I'm coming over to visit. And on that note, what advice would you give to first time like travelers to Asia? Because it can be a little bit daunting, I think. So if you had like one piece of advice, what would that be?
That's a very easy question for me. Try the food. Asians just love food and it's definitely part of the culture. So yeah, embrace it. I guess I'd also say if you're a first time traveler, try and be open to new experiences.
Mm.
And there's going to be cultural differences. Just embrace them. Keep an open mind. Just be flexible.
I'm almost like my belly, as in my stomach, will take me places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge foodie. I love
Me too.
I love trying new foods. I'm like,
I
have I ever
eat
tried it
I eat
before? No.
everything. Or I
I'm the
try
same.
everything once.
Yes, I'm the same. I will gladly try everything at least once. And then if somebody says, look, this is prepared completely different, try it again, see how you feel, then I'll be like, okay, I'll give it another go. And I adore that my partner is exactly the same as me. So whenever we go traveling, like we really don't mind trying any foods. And I think that's one of the best things about going to a country is to try, and immerse yourself in that food culture because I feel like food, not every country, I would say, for example, the UK is a country that their food culture is not necessarily the best, I would argue.
Yeah, yeah, it's got a
Uh,
very bad reputation, and there's a reason for it,
Yeah, there
sadly.
is absolutely a reason for it.
London's not
Um,
too bad, but yeah.
yeah,
But how is
that's it.
how is where you are?
See, I live in a little town and it's terrible. There's not, there's like, I think there's one restaurant and that's it. Everything else is kind of like
Oh,
pub food. And I
okay.
don't really enjoy that. I also grew up on Portuguese food. My mum was like, I will cook Portuguese food at home. And funnily enough, until I was like 18, I was very fussy. I was very picky of an eater. And then I turned 18 and I went and lived back home by myself. And I was like, do you know what? I actually will just try anything at this point because I'm like, I have to cook it. I have to try it anyways. So when I, went out into the world by myself, that's when I completely changed my eating habits. And now, like, I'll try anything. That if I go to the city, like near me, there's
Mm.
really not. I haven't really found an authentic Chinese restaurant. There's like Chinese takeaways, but that's different,
Yeah,
I think. There is a Korean restaurant in the city near me, and that is authentic. That is owned by Korean people, and I adore
nice.
the food there. I adore the food there.
Mm.
And yeah, but when I go back home actually to Portugal, it's a lot more fun because I live 20 minutes away from Lisbon, which is the capital of the country. So
Mhm.
I have an insane access to everything and anything. And there is a lot of Chinese people that live in Portugal and have opened up a lot of really tasty Chinese places to eat.
Mm.
So I tend to eat way better, there. Or when I pop to London and because I live, I think, about 3 hours away from London.
Mhm.
I always say my favorite place to hang out in London is Chinatown, hands down. Because
It's got some
I
great
just want,
restaurants.
it really does. Like, I just go from like bakery to bakery and like, little place to little place and like pick up everything and anything.
I would
Yeah,
say London has the best Chinese food in Europe.
mm. London is very multicultural. Like London is complete melting pot, I would say. And
There's a
if
lot of
you,
foodies in London as well,
yes, yes, there's
with
so
very
much
discerning.
variety. Yeah, I very much indulge myself completely when I go to London because I don't get that experience near me. So I love going down there just for the food. Like people always say, "Oh, I'd love to go to London." And I'm like, it's not a big deal to me. The only reason I love going down to London is because I get to try all of this food and I get
Yeah.
to go and eat all of this food, which sounds ridiculous, but
Doesn't
look,
sound
it is what
ridiculous
it
to me.
is.
Not to
There you
me.
go.
Hmm.
So we were saying, I think like I'm just looking at my questions. I think a lot of people who want to travel would be a little bit worried about language being a huge barrier. And what would you say to that statement?
So yeah, language barriers can be a concern, but many places in Asia, especially tourist destinations, have
Mhm.
English signage and people who can communicate in English to some extent. So, learning a few basic phrases in the local language can go a long way in enhancing your travel experience. And translation apps are also a really valuable tool. And people often appreciate the effort if you communicate in the language, even if it's just like a simple greeting or thank you. So
Mhm.
yeah, don't let language barriers deter you from exploring new places. It's just part of the adventure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I always say whenever I travel somewhere, as long as I can say very basic things like, hello and thank you and
Yeah,
please, just like basic manner things,
yeah.
I feel like a little bit better that I can, impart that into the whoever, whether it be a restaurant or a shop or whatever.
It
So
makes a
so yeah.
difference. Yeah.
And it makes people feel really, really good. Like it really does. I was saying we went to visit a friend of mine over in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands. And like, she speaks fairly fast, but like when she was having conversations, we went out a couple of times for dinner, and she would speak to us in English. But because that's just like what we're used to. But my partner and I, when it was just the two of us, we would attempt like Spanish. My partner is way better at Spanish than I am, way better at Spanish than I am. But I think like people would honestly appreciate just the effort of people
Yeah.
trying. And I think even just saying thank you in whatever language, they get very appreciative of that. I know when I used to work back in Portugal and I would work at a shop and people would come in and they would just say, tourists, and they would just say thank you in Portuguese. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Because I think it's not you saying it correctly, it's not you being perfect, it's just the fact that you're trying is
Yeah.
like, you know, great, I think.
I feel like British people have bad reputation for not really making an effort when they go abroad. I got that impression when I was last in Spain. Like I was in a tour group, and the tour guide, no one spoke Spanish, and the tour guide was kind of making fun of, yeah, how British people don't really make any effort. I felt bad.
Uh, I will say, Brits just kind of, I think I used to work at a very big outlet. So, and because we're so close to the capital, people would pop over to the outlet and we would have a lot of tourists, a lot of tourists. And a lot of the time Brits would like they wouldn't. They would just assume that you would speak English. But
Yeah,
I will
we're quite
say,
privileged.
yeah, I will say Marta's my Spanish friend. She
Mm.
will probably be listening to this. Spanish people, when they would come over, they would rattle off in Spanish and they would just assume that we would also understand. And sometimes you can, but they need to slow down a little bit because otherwise
Mm.
it just goes over your head. Um, but I think like I said, I think it just comes down to, I don't think it's like you can't make a generalization on the country as a whole because there's good and bad people everywhere. So I think it just depends down to the, individual. And how I think the newer generations are more trying than the older generations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
I
does.
think, yeah, I think that's something that culturally we're kind of like changing as the generations go, as we're becoming more open in a sense. The world has opened up a lot more and people travel further into different places. I think that's something that's
Yeah.
changing.
And I guess, yeah, there's that generalization, Brits abroad. But I think that's what I was kind of thinking of. Yeah.
I will say, if you go down to the Algarve, which is the most touristy area in Portugal. Like there's parts of it that isn't, but the Portuguese people don't talk about those because they don't want those parts to be taken over. They're like the hidden secrets. But if you go to like the touristy popular areas, so many Brits. And what do you see? You see like pubs and you see people like eating fish and chips. And I'm like, oh I I would just die going like abroad to eat what I could eat at home. Like it makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, honestly, you can like you will go and you will see a ton of Brits just having, and this is like a generalization, but it is actual. Like you see pubs down there and they will sell British beer, they will sell like English breakfast, full English breakfast, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, that's like the very, very touristy areas will cater to that. And I think people will quite enjoy that. I'm not one for those, but you know, each to their own. So I do kind of understand where the stigma comes from because it is a little bit earned. Um, but yeah, like I said, it's not for everybody. It's like, each to their own almost. So we've already talked about a little bit about food and that you're kind of, you're a foodie like I am. If you had to pick one food that you enjoyed along your travels? That's like the worst question to me. What would it be?
Like, so one like genre of food or
Yeah, we
one
can go for
food.
a genre.
Okay.
You can go either way.
I'll go for genre. It makes it
Hmm.
easier. So I feel like some people might think I'm biased, as my mom is Malaysian and Chinese, but my all-time favorite food on my travels has to be Malaysian food.
Mm.
So it's like it's highly diverse and it combines Malay, Chinese, and Indian flavors. And it's very rich and varied. It's basically a melting pot of delicious food and
Hmm.
flavors. So yeah, I'd go for Malaysian food.
That is one food I am yet to try is Malaysian food.
It's not great in the UK though,
Yeah,
or
exactly. That's
even
the
in
problem.
London.
But see, the thing is, I do try to make like my own at home a lot of the time
Mm,
because obviously I don't have access to it. Like I have the Asian supermarket, so I
mm.
have access to ingredients and stuff like that, but not the prepared food as in a restaurant. So I do try and like make my own a little bit. So yeah, maybe I'll have to look up. You'll have to tell me like an easy recipe. You'll have to ask your mom or or
Yeah,
yourself like an easy recipe. So you have to send it my way so I can like try it.
I'll see if
Um,
I can think of anything because I'm an okay cook, and my mom is also an okay cook.
mhm.
So I don't know. I'll see if I can think of something.
Yeah. Right. So I think we'll leave that one there and then we can move on to let's do some drama talking because I thought it would be nice to finish up the episode on some drama questions. Because we talk dramas all the time, but I think people really appreciate your insights into the language learning, and I think they will love the apps and the guides and where to start. So, but let's move on into, drama talk. And I have a couple of questions. So, this is a question I tend to ask all my guests in general. And the question is, what was your first Asian drama? And how did you, come about starting it?
So my first Asian drama was Empresses in the Palace.
Really?
Yeah, so it's been years since I watched it, but I remember really loving. I think it was really great power dynamics and
Mm-hmm.
development of the lead female in the harem. But I haven't watched it in so long, but that was my first Asian drama
Yeah.
that got me hooked in. Now I'm thinking I should rewatch it.
Rewatch it, yeah, and see what it is. See, that's one of the thing. It's now, like a lot of, I think that one was a really big drama in China, or I think it was, or it's
Mm.
mentioned a lot of the time, and I'm yet to watch it, but I have heard
You
very
have
good things
to.
about
I
it.
think it is a classic, and I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like you, it came out a while ago, but I think
mm,
it would still be very enjoyable to watch.
yeah.
So you
I'm
should watch it.
making this is the year that I'm making my way through some of the classics. So I started with, I'm currently watching Nirvana and Fire, which is
That's one of my top
mind blowing.
ones.
Is it? So to me, I feel like it is, I love it, but it is very much a brain workout. Like I need to
Mm,
really pay attention to what's happening.
yes, you
And I've
do.
always said I won't like recommend this to a beginner because they will not be able to appreciate it. And it's been on my watch list for a really long time until I feel comfortable enough that I can appreciate the drama. And like
Mm.
I finally got to it now, and I'm actually watching it. And we mentioned Sarah earlier on, and Sarah has watched it, and she is going to come on and review it with me. And I'm very excited because
I need
she
to
will,
listen to that episode.
yeah, because obviously she will be listening from the point of she'll understand the language and everything. She loved it. She really, really loved it. So I'm very excited to see like
One of the top
what her
ones.
take is. Yeah, what her take is versus what my take is as an international viewer versus someone who,
Mm.
is not. So I
It will
I
be an
will be very
interesting
excited for
episode.
that one. Yeah, I
Mm.
think it will be. I think it will be. I'm very excited for that one. But yeah, I'm making my way through Nirvana and Fire now. And then like another classic that I have for this year, I'm watching Joy of Life as well, which
Ooh. I need to add
and
that to
the
my list. Joy of Life.
very good, very, very good. I think you will like that one. So I'm making my way through some of the classics this year. So that's where I'm starting because they tend to be longer. So I have to like pace myself and allow myself like enough time to sort of watch them and whatnot. The other one that I have on my watch list for this year is the story of Ming Lan because that is like a whopper of a drama. It's like 72 episodes.
I don't
It's
think I
all
watched
like
this one either. Story of.
it's a fairly well-known one. It's like palace harem politics, I think.
Oh,
Um, so I'm quite excited about about that one.
I've added that to my list as well now.
There we go. There we go. So, what is your favorite Asian drama? And it doesn't have to be Chinese. It can be any, whatever
Um,
it is.
my
What is like your
favorite Asian drama. It's one of the first ones I watched, actually, I think,
hmm
but after Empresses in the Palace. It's called The First Half of My Life. It's very much about female empowerment, which I really like in a Chinese TV show. So it starts with, I don't want to give too much away, but so it starts with a female lead who is like very reliant on her husband and quite
Yeah,
unlikable. And then the drama kind of dwells into her journey of like self-discovery because she has to like rebuild her life after divorce. And
yeah,
then she really feels like a realistic portrayal of like a woman in that situation. And she has to like overcome like societal expectations and find her identity because her identity when you start is a housewife,
yeah,
and she's just, yeah, so dependent on her husband, and like her life is just like buying stuff. And she pursues like a personal and professional fulfillment during the show, and she takes control of her destiny. So I really
hmm
appreciated that narrative. So another one I should rewatch, actually.
I've added that to, I was scribbling down the name so I could go look it up because this sounds like something I would really enjoy. I adore when a female like is taken on a journey and it's a journey of empowerment and that you're just speaking my language when it comes to dramas. So I'm adding that one to my to
Yeah,
my
it's
list.
really good. I think you'd enjoy
Yeah.
it.
So Any favorite actors or actresses? Do you have any?
I kind of chop and change, but at the
I'm the
moment,
same.
Bai Lu is my favorite.
I
I
love
just
Bailey.
I really
I
like
love her.
her, I guess her demeanor, like the way
Mm,
she holds herself, her voice, even.
yeah,
I think I've watched around three of her shows. I want to watch
yeah,
more. So I've watched what was it? Only for Love?
yeah. Only for love. Yeah.
Story of Kuning
Queening
Palace
Palace. Yeah.
and Arsenal Military Academy.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a good role for her. She did a very good job in that one, I think.
Is that how she got very big?
No.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
I, I've watched all of her dramas, bar two,
Oh,
because I'm a huge Bailu fan.
it
I
sounds
think.
like it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a huge Lou fan. I really, really like her chemistry. She tends to have really good chemistry on screen.
She's got
Um,
some kind of
n- n-
sass to her, which I like.
yeah. And the thing is, when you watch her in Variety, did you watch, because you watched the story of Cooning Palace, did
Hmm.
you watch the Variety show that goes along with it?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't know there was one.
There is. So it's called oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to look it up, but it is a variety show and it's on iQIYI and it goes with the drama and it's basically the cast of like the story of Cooning Palace and they basically get to do challenges together. It's only 6 episodes,
Oh,
but
oh, I
it's
must watch
so
them.
much fun. It's called As You Wish, Story of Cooning Palace. So
Okay.
that's what it's called. And honestly, it's very easy watch. You will be laughing the way all the way through. Um, and you'll figure out very quickly Bailu is she tends to play these characters that are kind of like stoic almost and whatnot, but that's not her personality at all. She's very fun. She's very loud. Like even her laughter, it's so loud. It gets everybody going. And so in this, you have Zhang He as well as the second male lead that I forgot his name right now. But the three of them together in this like the variety show hilarious. They're so funny because they play into their characters, but obviously
Hmm.
they're there as themselves, but they play into their characters. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend you watch
Okay, I'll watch it. Oh,
the variety show. And they go to like these very beautiful places in China out in the countryside to do these challenges. So it's a lot of fun.
nice. I didn't
Um
know that existed.
yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
watching that.
Yeah.
Which Bailu drama is your favorite?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I would say, and this may be controversial, I would say some of her best work came out of Till the End of the Moon. Because
The
I
end of
think yeah, so that one I will say caveat. It is Shansha and it's true like enemies to lovers. Like these people hate each other and people weren't I was okay with the ending, how it ended. Some people weren't too happy about it. I was absolutely fine with the ending. But the chemistry, like her and Lo Yun Chi, is some of the best chemistry ever.
um,
Like those two together, it's the second time they work together, and the costuming is some of the best costuming I've ever seen. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I think like that's still what. Oh, I will show you something, and to you guys, you're listening at home. I'll explain what I'm showing. Friend of mine did a calendar for me 2 years ago. That is like every month has a new drama, and I loved it. I freaked out, loved it, and she saw that I loved it so much, she made it again and it's March, and funnily enough, it's till the end of the moon. So I'll just show you some of the images. Like that's just like some of the styling from
did your
till the end of the
friend
moon.
make this herself?
Yeah, so she went online and made it herself.
You
I
should
have
start
one
selling
from
those.
I was telling her, and she's like, no, you can just personalize these calendars like with whatever. You just go online and put the pictures. But I adore it also because it takes her time to like go in and find the pictures. And basically what she does is she'll stalk my drama list and she'll figure out like what my top dramas are for the year and she'll use those for the calendar. And I adore her for it. Like just the
She's a good
fact
friend.
that yeah, just the fact that she puts so much time and effort. So yeah, I was glanced over. But yeah, Till the End of the Moon, I think is arguably one of her best works.
Does it have a good
Just because
ending?
so it's open-ended. I would say it's
Oh,
open-ended, but I would say because of the tone of the story throughout, it's the best ending they could have gone with that suits the story. So that's why I didn't personally mind it. So yeah, that's,
I'll give
I
it a
think that
watch.
was yeah. So do we have another little question? Do you still use or need subtitles at this point?
My preference is to watch stuff with subtitles, but I have watched without when forced to on a plane last year, actually.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because I was very happy with myself because I understood the gist of what was going on. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the previous time I had tried to watch something without subtitles, I didn't understand most of it. So that was
Yeah.
quite interesting. Uh,
See,
yeah. So yeah, my preference is to have subtitles still. So I
I
fully or kind of mostly understand what is going on.
mhm. But I think it can be really helpful to have the subtitles, Oh, I'm nowhere near fluent or, I definitely need subtitles. Um, but I think like you can sort of associate the words with what's being said as well. I think it can really help. So what do you usually tend to watch? Like if you're wanting to pick something up, what are some dramas that, not dramas, but like what do you tend to gravitate towards?
Um, Basically whatever is hot at the moment. And
Yeah.
if there are actors I recognize, like if Bai Lu is in it, if Dylan Wang, Yang Mi,
Hmm.
to name a few, are in it, I'll just go for
Hmm.
it. Go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Or if like you were to recommend it, I'll just watch
Oh,
it.
thank you. Right. And the last question we have is, do you think using dramas to learn can be an effective way to pick up some things here and there?
So that is a very interesting question. So I think dramas are a great motivator. And as I said previously, like motivation is really key to learning a language. And all the high level Chinese learners I know are really into Chinese dramas. So I think that does say something. But apart from one person who's my brother, he's not into Chinese dramas. But yeah, I think you can't just learn from TV shows
Yeah.
only. I think I've read somewhere if you can understand even 80%, it's just not enough to know what is going on fully.
Yeah.
So, and I think the ability to learn new things is not great. Like you're not learning a huge amount when you're watching a TV show. You might learn small things here and there, but yeah, it shouldn't be your main source of learning.
Yeah.
But yeah, motivation is just so important to make you continue to learn a language. And Chinese programs for me make the language come alive. So yeah, just living in London where I don't have much exposure to Mandarin, I think it's really helped with my listening skills.
Yeah. Okay, I think that is it. Anna, thank you so much for coming on. You've been a
Thanks.
lovely guest.
Oh, thanks for having
I hope
me.
you enjoyed it. And
It
I
was so
think
much
that's it,
fun.
guys. That is the episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we shall see you next time. Bye.
Bye.